We all know the standard training montage. An athlete steps onto the court, locks in, and executes the exact same motion hundreds of times in a row, sweating through the physical grind required by the 10,000-hour rule. Then, the actual game begins. The whistle blows, the pressure spikes, and that perfectly practiced motion falls apart. The athlete chokes, unable to access the skill they spent hours rehearsing. We blame this on a failure of muscle memory. But muscles possess zero mnestic capacity. They are end effectors, taking orders from a complex neural hierarchy inside the central nervous system. Pounding away at a single motion over and over creates the fluency illusion. This is a cognitive blind spot where continuous repetition puts the brain into a low-effort zombie mode, relying on short-term working memory without triggering long-term structural changes in the neural pathway. Feeling comfortable and fluid during practice is a warning sign. That temporary fluency leaves the skill vulnerable when the pressure rises during real-world performance. To encode a physical skill, the central nervous system requires the contextual interference effect. This is a neurocognitive phenomenon where unpredictability during practice forces the brain into a state of deep processing. You create this interference by interleaving different skills. If a player hits a forehand, immediately followed by a backhand and then a volley, the brain is forced to abandon the active motor plan. Rotating back to the forehand, the player cannot rely on working memory. Their brain must reconstruct the action plan from scratch. This cycle of forgetting and rebuilding drives neuroplasticity, thickening myelin around the neural pathway to create permanent procedural memory. The clumsiness and frustration you feel when switching between tasks are the biological markers that neurological encoding is taking place. Eventually, the novice becomes an intermediate, and progress hits a wall. At this plateau, grinding harder and adding more hours to the training block yields no improvement. This happens because skill improvement does not occur while the body is moving. This graph maps performance over a training session. Notice that during active practice blocks, the line remains flat. The leaps in ability happen during narrow gaps of waking rest. These are micro offline gains, brief windows where the nervous system wires movement into the brain. During these rest periods, the brain engages in 20x neural replay, and it fires fast. This is a mechanism where the hippocampus fires the exact neural sequence of the movement you just practiced, cementing the synaptic connections. The brain rehearses the sequence at 20 times the speed of reality, effectively practicing a motion dozens of times in a 3-second pause. Relentless physical grinding floods the brain with sensory noise, blocking this computational error correction. Strategic 10-second pauses of complete stillness are where mastery is physically forged. Those 10-second pauses handled the immediate encoding, but cementing those traces into permanent architecture requires pulling back to the athlete's full 24-hour cycle, specifically the necessity of sleep. Motor learning relies on Stage 2 non-rapid eye movement sleep, or NREM2. This light phase of the sleep cycle is characterized by unique brainwave frequencies that trigger the intracellular mechanisms required for synaptic plasticity. The engine of NREM2 is the sleep spindle. This brief burst of high-frequency brain activity acts as a biological save state, transferring the fragile skills acquired that day from temporary hippocampal storage to permanent neocortical distribution. To harness this, researchers utilize the 10 to 20-minute motor learning power nap. This duration maximizes the density of sleep spindles while avoiding the grogginess of deep, slow wave sleep. During NREM2, the brain performs a neurological transfer, upgrading frontal skills into permanent physiological architecture. At the peak of elite performance, athletes face a different problem, the deeply myelinated bad habit. It's a flaw buried in their mechanics that only surfaces when the pressure is immense. Practicing the right way often fails at this level. The old neural pathway is thick and dominant, and the moment the athlete is stressed, the brain defaults to that deeply worn groove. To delete the habit, the athlete has to open the Reconsolidation window. This is a temporary biological state where a consolidated memory becomes chemically unstable and editable the moment it is recalled. Opening that window requires a technique called error amplification. The elite athlete must intentionally execute their bad habit and then massively exaggerate it. By performing the motion wrong on purpose, they generate a sensory mismatch, known as a prediction error. This biochemical surprise signal alerts the brain its current physical model is flawed, rendering the old motor trace unstable. You cannot destroy a deeply ingrained bad habit by ignoring it. You have to biologically unlock it by failing on purpose. The moment that error signal fires, a time-sensitive window opens. Immediately following the exaggerated mistake, the athlete executes the correct technique. Because the neural circuit is open and unstable, sensory data from the correct movement overwrites the old trace. The error is wiped out, and the correct motion takes place. Before the high-stakes performance, the athlete locks this new pathway in using visual motor behavioral rehearsal, or VMBR. This is a structured protocol of vivid internal imagery that fires the same neural circuits as the physical movement, but just below the threshold of muscle activation. This intense mental rehearsal acts as a final stabilization step, thickening the myelin around the new pathway without requiring physical energy before the match. Ultimately, true athletic mastery and flawless execution under pressure come from the precise biological engineering of the central nervous system.